So, horror. A pretty interesting genre to the common eye. It's widely diversified in all types of media, games, movies, books, you name it. But today, I'm going to primarily focus on the gaming aspect. And to go even further, Roblox HORROR. It's pretty interesting. Stick with me to the best of your ability while I try to unravel a little bit of this genre in Roblox. So best chances are you've had a fair share of time playing horror games on Roblox if you're watching this. And if you haven't, you probably don't even know that there's even horror games on Roblox to begin with. But trust me, there's plenty. A little bit too much for its own good, but hey, that's alright. You might even believe horror and Roblox to be the weirdest pairing ever, but when executed right, trust me, it's kinda good. Sure, you get games like... but, you can't expect a cinematic experience from every game. So anyway, let's cover the history first so we could lay the ground out. Or you could watch this video from Toasted Cherries. They mostly go over the different horror games that have appeared on Roblox, defining the eventual evolution of the games. Pretty engaging video, go check it out. So actually, just kind of scrap the history a bit. Go watch this video instead. I promise it'd be better than whatever the hell I was gonna yap about. So I'm just gonna summarize it a little bit. 2006, the beginning of Roblox. There isn't much horror shit yet, or rather at all. A few years later, the spooks start to take a turn, with developers eventually having the intended mindset of it being taken as a horror game. Then as the years pass on, you get glorious blueprints such as the Area 51 games, and I'd say it wasn't until the mid-2010s that the quality in horror games spiked by a great amount. In quality, gameplay, and about everything else. Then the 2020s hit, where individual horror games started to take over and fully come into fruition. And of course, the creation of the godfathers of the subgenres came to be. Camping, Peggy, Doors, The Mimic, Rainbow Friends, you get it. There's also some type of theme I think you've noticed, but I'll get to that later. But it is kinda nice that there's this many subgenres of horror, as it'd be pretty boring if everything just turned out to be something like Slender. It's also quite fascinating that there is this much since, it's Roblox, but let's just disregard that fact. So it's clearly evident that people enjoy horror on Roblox. It's just that we barely get anything shining with originality nowadays in a big and beautiful 25. It was pretty easy to distinguish which horror games made an impact since they're the ones that stand out with originality compared to the others, all while being a fun game too. And yeah, you heard me. In order for a scary game to be memorable, first, the game also gotta be good. I know, a surprising revelation. For example, just look at Doors. You've heard of this before, come on now. But the main reason this game was this popular was probably because of the gameplay, and to be definite, the trial and error gameplay. It was a central gimmick to the entire game, to which each time you died, you gained knowledge on what to do next time. Or you could just look it up, but why would you? So then eventually, you could just beat it entirely. It was addictive, engaging, and most importantly, actually fun and kinda unique. Sure, the system itself did gradually decrease the fear factor of the entire thing, but at least it was actually enjoyable and didn't feel like a walking simulator in its entirety. Almost every minute there was action, suspense, all that. Those are the key components to a pretty cool horror game in Roblox. It was cemented itself as a solid game in the history of Roblox horror due to its oozing originality. And we can all thank Spooky's jumpscare mention for that, since that was one of those main inspirations as well. And as inspiration keeps on going, the games also get better. Kinda like Pressure, a game inspired by the likes of the aforementioned. Upon first glance, you might just think of it to be just doors submerged underwater, but no. This game has so many separate additions to it that it just does not feel like Doors 2. Yeah, of course, there's some similarities here and there, but that's just the thing about inspiration. The thing is that it just isn't a blatant copy with the reskin. And also, it has even better qualities that Doors doesn't have, which is also what makes this game original at the same time. I'm talking about Sebastian, of course. The meshes with the creatures are also very different from Doors, and dare say a little bit better. And Pressure is a great example of inspiration done right, in my opinion. They have their own little fandoms, strategies that are all quite different from Doors. So good job, team, on using inspiration right. But okay, that's enough yapping about gameplay and originality. You probably didn't even come here for that. Came here for Roblox Horror, so I shall provide. Kinda. So now, what makes an actual game scary? Sure, a horror game can have good gameplay mechanics, but that doesn't really equate it to good spooks and scares, does it? I mean, once you're equipped with a gun in Resident Evil game, literally only fear is running out of ammunition. But maybe that's just Resident Evil for you, I don't know. So let's go into depth of what makes a scary game on Roblox scary. And again, I am not an experienced man that has a degree in psychology, only a person that goes to Zenless Zone Zero. For starters, and for what I believe to be the most important, is the ambience, or the environment. I mean, it's pretty obvious in any horror game. Environment is one of the strongest factors in any horror game, and if done correctly, I believe it will carry the entire scariness factor of an entire game. That's also why Silent Hill is pretty cool. Its music, environment, and all that. Even if your world is set in a jolly school or some shit, it could still set the stage for good horror. Doki Doki is obvious and of course what I was looking to. But back to Roblox, it could still be done. Let's take a look at Judy, for example. I didn't think of that name, did you? A Roblox game that came out quite a few years ago, which is honestly kind of hard to believe. I was gonna go back to it to get some gameplay footage, but then I realized that the game got taken down for some reason. Kind of odd, but it's fine. Okay, so Judy was, not gonna lie, a pretty eerie game back then. I was around the age of 11 or 12, so you could blame it on that for the reason being, to be honest. But the main reason I was creeped out by this game was honestly kind of the map design. Not the type of daddy long leg likes. Although that was honestly still pretty scary though. But rather, the map. If I remember correctly, in chapter 2, it took place in some type of manor where there was just the ugliest butler there to greet you. I forgot almost all the things that happened before that, but I guess you just somehow ended up there. But yeah, navigating throughout the entire thing was scary within itself, but also the idea of a spider-like creature following you throughout your every step also made it worse. And yeah, the jump scares for this game were something, but it is because me and the boys with it back then, so there's some credit.
What?
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
Did you die already?
Oh my goodness!
And another game to give its props to would be Apophobia, for obvious reasons. Number one reason is that it is based off the Backrooms, which is of course inspiration off of liminality or the liminal space. I know, this game's kind of outdated nowadays, but just the idea of those types of rooms is still kind of fascinating to me. And this game honestly does kind of enhance that sort of feeling and experience. And evidently, there's some monsters because, you know, horror games, they need them. But even if we do disregard that, the map designs are still quite nice. Now, of course, I believe or also know that some of these levels are inspired off of those that are already around on the internet, so there may not be any original levels, but still. Most of the images are just like one single image of a room, with the developers of the game taking those images and expanding widely on that, adding their own gameplay mechanics, other areas, and much more. From the deadly pool rooms to the parking lots, it truly feels like a dreadful experience being in there. Apophobia's map designs are just so amazing because even if most of the levels follow the same theme of liminality, they all have a different sense of contrast from each other. And even then, they all have their own overhanging eeriness to it that's also quite distinct. Anyways, I think you get the damn point by now. But the environment is just a foundation. I think the realest part is how tension is incorporated into the game, or rather, actually, both tension and suspense. They kind of go hand in hand with each other. That's pretty common nowadays, but I'd say some chapters from the Remake incorporate these elements pretty well. I don't remember much since I didn't play it in chronological order, so I'm just gonna be speaking out of my ass for this part. I believe it was in book 2, where there was a tall-looking Japanese woman chasing the player while you had to go and complete objectives. Now, of course, the entire concept itself of a monster chasing you while you're on your itinerary is nothing new, but it still works. Almost works every time, actually, as that's probably the most used idea in every horror game ever. Some kind of chasing, probably. But there are times where it does fail, like in some other places with the Mimic. I'll try to reference it by using the background footage, but I remember it was a stage where we had to go and get some talismans while getting chased by the ugliest mofo around, man. I mean, me and my friends might have been playing stupid, but that was just not fun at all. It was kind of annoying, to be honest, which is what's gonna happen most of the time if it's not executed correctly. But obviously, tension isn't just locked behind chase scenes and stuff like that. It's activated by a lot of things. The music, interactables, and much more. It could also be activated by my least favorite way, jump scares. I know. Call me a pussy or something, but I just believe jump scares to be one of the cheapest ways to evoke some spooks into a person. There's barely any times where jump scares are actually effective, even in or out of Roblox. Yeah, the initial reaction definitely gets you, but I much prefer the actual build-up of tension and shit like that. It's just such a simple, although now not an effective way to make a game more scary. If you only love jump scares in horror, go back to FNAF 1 or something, but even then, that wasn't even the scariest part of the game. It was the ambience, and I guess the entity designs, which is, to be honest, one of the most arguably and decidedly scariest factor of a horror game. Just imagine Doors without the figure, Pressure without Sebastian, even though he isn't really a monster, the Mimic without the Eldritch looking bitches, and I guess Peggy without, well, Peggy and friends. It would honestly change the game up quite a bit. If you're running or hiding from something, you better expect it to give off a scary appearance at the very least. If you just have some twig looking guy chasing after you, it doesn't really feel the same, does it? Well, except for SCP-3008, but that's just kinda goofy. Bob, on the other hand. But yeah, back to the main point, your scary guy, your main person on a thumbnail, is definitely what's gonna pull people in the most. Now, then again, you've seen the games on Roblox, and also the people playing it. Sometimes not always the scariest designs reel people in. It's sometimes the things from Rainbow Friends. So you see, maybe the people that play Roblox don't prefer absolutely demented creatures that should be banished, but rather something more marketable. So hello, Mascot horror, a pretty popular subgenre of horror that I kind of tend to dislike, but as of 2025, it has dwindled down a bit. Well, mostly actually. So that's something, and if you don't know what Mascot horror is, let's go look it up. We'll just think Big Bear. But yeah, the resurgence of Mascot horror recently has just been kind of astounding inside of Roblox, thanks to a good amount of horror games like Poppy Playtime, Golden Band, and the likes of that. And it seems a good amount of developers seem inspired to make their own, to which it also kind of works on Roblox. The main part is a lot of players seem to like these games, like a lot, and it's pretty obvious why. The main demographic. So of course, we can have living nightmares being shoved down our throats for the genres of horror inside Roblox all the time. So what can we turn to? Something a bit more friendly, something that could also have a chance of being in the toy section of a Target. Which, you know what? I'm actually kind of fine with it, because these games, although not freakishly scary at all, it still provides some kind of enjoyment. And this either comes from it being laughably bad, or the gameplay mechanics. Kinda like Rainbow Friends, for example. The game revolves around you going around a map searching for items, which of course sounds pretty damn boring on paper, but hey, it was kind of fun. Those are also mainly due to being chased by characters with the names of blue, green, orange, purple, and yeah, those are actual names. But if you're expecting me to talk about Piggy, sorry, I'm just not really a fan of that game. I don't know why I prefer Rainbow Friends over Piggy. I just do. I feel like games like these have their primary focus not on gameplay, or rather horror, but appeal. They appeal to the main demographic, of course, little kids, which you've seen the front page, of course. You've seen what type of horror games on Roblox dominate the charts, and you could probably guess who's playing them most of the time, due to the player base and also kind of the fandom as well. Now, a fandom never ever represents what the original media actually is, as that's been pretty evident throughout all of history actually. Anyway, this does remind me of another topic that kind of relates to this, which is the difference between multiplayer and single player horror games on Roblox. The difference between these and their fandoms are still quite drastic, because, well, people just don't play single player games on Roblox, most likely. They'd rather watch somebody like Flamingo just play it. Why? I don't know, because I do it too. Are we all just scaredy cats? Possibly. Or it may be that we just don't find them to be as enjoyable as multiplayer games. The quality in single player games, in my opinion, are very much better. For example, a pretty cool single player horror game by the name of It Lurks is a very interesting experience. It came out a while ago, and I still haven't played it yet, but I have seen many YouTubers such as Cub Scouts, Flamingo, and others play it. It does seem like a pretty cool game, with a cool concept as well, even if it does look a little bit outdated. It seems to also carry its own lore, which is pretty sick. But there's also quite a bit of other single-player horror games that could encapsulate the same type of horror this game has. They're just hidden amongst the bloat of other games, like this, other games like it. From a little bit of research I was doing, it was a game about topics that covered things such as man, do all virtual horror games on here all have some disturbing topics or something? I guess so. And another single player game I wanted to mention would be My Eyes Deceive Me, which is also a fucking demented game with a pretty disgusting ending. Short summary, you play as a girl that's seemingly trapped in a basement, probably about her entire life. She talks to her papa, who gives her a supply each day. This person also wants to keep the girl trapped by lying to her about the outside world and its monsters for whatever reason I will explain in a bit. But the most important thing in this game would be these pills, which, spoiler alert, are kind of, you know, some kind of sedative, instant sleeping pills, whatever. Things weird ass dreams happen from day to day, and to which I have no idea what they represent, not gonna lie. But eventually, once you do reach a certain day, you're granted the options to take the pills or not. And if you don't, congrats, that's I think that's a good ending, and you witness the sun for the first time. Kind of blinds you. In fact, it really blinds you actually. And if you don't, well, now that is one way to end the game. I won't go into much more depth and detail, as you could probably conclude what that sentence means yourself. If you still don't know, you may be a little bit too innocent for this world. But anyway, this ending did shock me when I was eating my rice, watching some YouTubers finishing it. It surprised me a bit, definitely. This is how you kind of do some horror. Now this is how you do some horror on Roblox. But here's the thing. This game is kind of like a direct direct remake of a game on Steam or itch.io. Same message, same name, same gameplay, same everything actually. It's basically just a whole ass remake of it. So congrats to the developer in Roblox for pushing the same story and message to another platform, but is kinda copying an entire game justified even if it's just like this? Okay, well, the original creator requested a shutdown for the Roblox version, and on top of that, the game was too dark as it was put on review. So if you were looking to play this game, too bad, man. But back to the main question. I think it's great if it's transformative and changes the actual game enough. Sure, it could be executed pretty well, but if it doesn't drift or have a sort of derivative from the original source, then it could still be regarded as just a straight up copy. Games like Scream Stream, those Exit 8 games could also just be regarded copies as well, as they're basically the same game, but just on Roblox, although they are pretty fun games in my opinion. So going back to what I said about Doors, it carries great inspiration from Rooms and Spooky's Jumpscares Mansion, and yet has its own complete separate identity. That is how you correctly and outstandingly make a so-called copy. Just taking an entire concept and expanding on it with its own implementations. Now I do have a game that's kind of a mixed bag for Remakes, and that would be short, creepy horror stories. This game is a collection of, well, short, creepy horror stories that are either multiplayer or single player, and some are pretty obvious to tell which is which, like The Vanishing Karen Carter, which is inspired by one of Kojima's greatest works that would have been, and The Night Cleaner by Lixian. Now there's also some other games here that might or might not carry direct inspiration from other games, like The Dollhouse probably. But if there is, leave a comment about it. But the question here is, did the developer change enough things to label it as transformative? Kind of. Got a bit about The Night Cleaner, but I think that was mostly about the same thing. As for the PT looking one, I think it carried the same idea but had a few changes, such as whatever was going on in the bathroom. Pretty gory if you ask me. So whether the change is transformative or not is up to you, and up to whatever the developers had thought of, and the original ones as well. So my thoughts on this? Well, hey, if they give credit to the original concept holders, then that's great. And if they actually change the game to look completely different, that's way better. But if the OPs want their game shut down due to things like diverting revenue and stuff like that, then they probably should be allowed to do it. A pretty simple take. So yeah, you get it. No matter how good Remake might be, the original might be better most of the times. I've played Blur and all the Phasmophobia type games, but I think I know that the OG will be better anyway. But hey, in my eyes, remaking games isn't nearly as bad, or maybe it is, as copying the same game over and over and over again. And I'm looking specifically at you, the anime night games and experiences. Here's a cute little story. A few years ago, I hopped in a game called The Graveyard Experience game with my friends, thinking it was going to be a pretty cool and unique horror game for some reason. And it turns out it was nothing but a task simulator and a whole load of nothing. Ending with straight buns, gameplay straight teaks, and almost all of the above that would qualify for a pretty boring ass game. And basically the same thing goes for the midnight games. They're not even trying at this point. The premises they set up could be interesting, and then it just turns out to be another nothing burger. And also, it's not even laughably bad, it's just pure ass, man. So, sorry if you do like these games, but I just have to speak my mind. Probably the only thing redeeming about the midnight games is the VHS filter and how laughably ugly they made the characters look. These are just some copy and paste horror games that caught my eyes. If you find any more, just tell everyone in the comment section. You know, if these copy and paste games actually were good, it probably makes sense to keep on copying them, but they're not. They're not even that good. I'm not gonna lie. So this brings me to the current state of Roblox horror in the year 2025, and including the late months of 2024. To be honest, there hasn't been anything really eye-catching in terms of horror. In terms of concept, games, and all sorts like it. Every game just feels mundane at this point. Like, there are some good hidden games out there, like Grace and whatnot, but none of those games excite me to the point of what Doors or even Apophobia had done to me back then. Because don't get me wrong, all these games are fun, of course. It's also just because most of these games feel like they're a building block to one another. What I mean by that is that it just shares a similar concept / overall idea, and it just adds a teeny little sprinkle on top. That's what I can say about 70% of the horror games I've played. Most of them involve the fundamentals of finding keys, getting chased, and probably a maze, inherently. But I'm glad that a little formula is starting to fade away a bit, as more people realize that there's much better alternatives to insert horror into Roblox. And, you know, I get it though. It's Roblox. Like I said before, we can't always have the best quality horror or just best quality games in general. And as a person who can barely develop and created one of the most whack-ass hobbies ever, it's probably just called something simple. evolution. Over time, you've seen the increase in quality, the expansion of different ideas and all that. So why are some developers afraid to do that and they would just rather copy other people's ideas? Well, I might know an answer to that. You don't want to make your work a waste of time and effort, but it kind of goes the same way for what I'm doing right now. I could be making a clip channel of the AMP house just straight up jerking each other every day. Dude then just straight up bouncing on a fan or some shit like that. Just post it up on every social media app ever to exist, but here I am. Because I'm not afraid to do something that I, myself, have some desire to do in some capacity. I know that if I kept making and spamming block kills videos, I could probably be a little bit more successful. But I like to savor my time with it. Unless my channel actually goes to the dumps, that is. Maybe then I'll start spamming those videos. So to any developers that may be watching this video, please expand your ideas, even if they fail. I guarantee at least some people will enjoy it. Although the revenue may be down for you guys, but hey, it's about the players, right? Because to be honest, if you, a developer in Roblox, only makes horror games to make some cash, let me tell you something. I think that shit's gonna be like 1 in a million chance for you to actually get rich off of it. If your sole purpose is just money, it'll be much better if you make a simulator game, fighting game, role-playing game, or literally anything else. You should know a little bit about the demographic of the site you wish to have some control over. Because realistically, the only way to successfully make money from a Roblox horror game is also resell merchandise about the products at the same time. Like Rainbow Friends, a little bit of Piggy, etc. Or if we just have game-breaking game passes. And also, many people only consistently play with the same horror games if the game's, well, fun, and also has a little bit of replayability to it. That's why games like 3008, Rainbow Friends, and Forsaken have a gradual and steady amount of players playing the game every day. And yes, the most entertaining horror games on Roblox are the ones that you do play once with the chapters and all that, but it's really a one and done type of thing. So that might be the reason as to why there's a lot of more horror games focusing on their own gameplay, rather than the spooky factor. Many more. Maybe a bit too much, to where horror games that focus on the aspect a bit too much just aren't scary anymore. Yeah, they're quite enjoyable to play, but what's also enjoyable is getting scared too. The games I mentioned are like only scary for the first few minutes, or when there's, you know, a high suspense type of scene. There just has to be a good balance between the both, and so far, I don't know. There just has to be a good balance between the both, and so far, I do not know what that balance is. Maybe there's just some horror game out there I've yet to uncover. We'll see. But hey, the future of Roblox Horror is looking to be pretty promising, seeing on the new visual and gameplay upgrades here and there. All in all, in conclusion, TLDR, Roblox Horror is in a state of unstable evolving creativity, but is still a pretty interesting genre to pay attention to. No games have been that scary, but they still get their message across. And by the way, let me just mention one more time that these games are actually fun, especially with friends, man. If you don't have anybody to play Roblox Horror games with, then I'm sorry, bro. Games like these just get better with other people, and that's a fact. Anyhow, I'm gonna be waiting for the next genre-defining horror game. It's just what's gonna be the next doors, Apophobia, even the Mimic, or perhaps single-player horror games might rule the world again. Anyway, that's about all I gotta say for this video. Thank you again for 400 subscribers. That number still amazes me to this day. 400 individuals. Woo! Deeply appreciate you guys. I really do. We're closer to 500 than 0, so love you fellows. I do want to apologize a bit for not uploading as frequently as I used to. I do not know what's gotten into me. So to those of you who have been waiting for me to upload, okay, well, just thanks for sticking around, viewing the switch up of my content and all that, and still deciding to stay subscribed. You're a real one. So with that being said, have a good day, good month, and see ya fellows.